What comes to your mind when you hear the name Medusa? A terrifying monster? A cursed creature? Or could it be something entirely different? A tale of pride, greed, and an innocent life crushed between gods. This story begins not with horror, but with devotion. Medusa was a young priestess who served in Athena's sacred temple. Her beauty was unmatched. Even the goddesses were said to envy her radiant golden hair and bright eyes. But Medusa herself never sought fame for her looks. What she truly longed for was to be remembered as faithful, pure, and loyal. Every day she prayed, tended to the temple, and honored Athena with a devoted heart. The temple was her world, her refuge, her joy. But peace rarely lasts in the world of myths. The gods were filled with rivalry, ambition, and conflict. It was Poseidon, the powerful god of the seas, who shattered her peace. One day he saw her in the temple. At first glance, he was struck by her beauty, overcome with desire. Was it passion? Was it conquest? Perhaps both. But in Poseidon's stormy heart, desire and ambition were never far apart. Athena and Poseidon had long been enemies. Athena ruled with wisdom and order. Poseidon was wild, proud, and quick to anger. And now Medusa, without choice, became the pawn in their endless rivalry. That night, Poseidon entered Athena's temple. He sees Medusa as if blinded by greed, as if she were a prize to be claimed. What was done in the sacred halls of Athena was not only a crime against an innocent girl, it was an act of war between gods. So what happened afterward? Who was punished? Surely Poseidon, the one who committed the offense? Of course not. He was a god, untouchable by mortal or divine law. Athena, unable to strike at Poseidon directly, turned her anger toward the only one she could reach, Medusa. The punishment was cruel. Her golden hair twisted into venomous serpents. Her shining eyes, once full of life, became a weapon. A curse that turned anyone who looked upon them into stone. The innocent priestess was condemned, her devotion forgotten, her name twisted into fear. And so, the question has echoed for centuries. Was this justice? Or was Medusa simply an innocent soul sacrificed in the feud of gods? History often chooses its answer. It remembers her as a monster. But what about you? Will you see her as legend tells you, or will you look deeper? At the victim behind the curse? Banished, cursed, and alone. Medusa's life was forever changed. She had once been a devoted servant in the temple of wisdom, but now she was driven into exile, her very presence feared. Her golden hair no longer shone. In its place writhed serpents hissing with malice. Her sparkling eyes no longer reflected purity. They became weapons of death. One glance could freeze the strongest warrior into lifeless stone. But here is the cruel truth. Medusa had never asked for this fate. She had never sought power, never sought war. She was merely punished for what a god had done. People began to whisper her name in fear. Stories spread quickly, and soon the image of the monster replaced the truth of the innocent girl. Songs no longer praised her devotion. They warned of her deadly gaze. And yet, if you looked past the curse, there was still a soul inside. A heart that had once been pure. A woman who still carried the memory of faith and loyalty. But no one wished to see that. It was easier to believe in the monster. For Athena, Medusa became a symbol. A reminder to all of what happens when one challenges the goddess of wisdom. For Poseidon, Medusa was a trophy, proof of his defiance. And so the rivalry of the gods was written across the suffering of one innocent woman. Athena's temple had been defiled, her pride wounded. Poseidon's victory was a scar that would not heal. and Medusa's torment became the weapon through which their war was fought. But mortals too played their part. Kings began to see Medusa not as a victim but as an opportunity. Her curse became a legend that traveled across kingdoms. Warriors dreamed of slaying her and gaining eternal glory. Among them was King Polydectes. Ambitious, greedy, and cunning, he saw Medusa as a chance to rid himself of an obstacle. That obstacle was Perseus, the son of Danae, the one who stood in the way of the king's desire. Polydectes longed for Danae, but Perseus guarded her. So the king devised a cruel plan. He demanded Perseus bring him the head of Medusa, an impossible task. For who had ever faced her and lived? Her cave was said to be filled with stone figures. Men who once breathed, now trapped forever in lifeless silence. No hero had ever returned. For Perseus, this mission was a death sentence. For Polydectes, it was the perfect trap. And for Medusa, it was yet another chain of suffering in a life that had already been stolen. But this time, the gods intervened. Athena and Hermes took interest in the young man. Perhaps they sought to help him, or perhaps they saw in him another pawn for their endless games. Athena gave Perseus a polished shield that gleamed like a mirror. Hermes gave him winged sandals, swift as the wind, and in his hands Perseus carried a magical bag meant to hold the cursed head. So the stage was set. The victim was waiting in her exile. The so-called hero was sent to slay her. And above them all, the gods watched, smiling faintly at the game they had arranged. The sea roared, the winds howled, and Perseus, armed with gifts from the gods, began his journey. Above him, the heavens watched in silence. Below, the earth trembled with the weight of destiny. Perseus was no ordinary man. He was brave, strong, and determined, yet still human. A young warrior caught in the web of divine power. He walked a path woven not by choice, but by the schemes of gods and kings. His heart carried both fear and hope. Fear of facing the monster whose name turned men to stone. Hope that, if he succeeded, he would protect his mother, defeat the king, and be remembered as a hero. But was this truly his quest? Or was he simply another pawn in a game much larger than himself? Athena's shield gleamed in his hand, reflecting the world around him. The winged sandals carried him lightly across land and sea. And yet, these gifts were not without purpose. They ensured the gods would decide his fate, not Perseus himself. At the same time, Medusa remained in her cave, exiled and alone. She was not hunting, not plotting, not seeking revenge. She was simply surviving. A woman cursed into solitude, abandoned by all, feared by everyone. Legends described her as a beast, her lair surrounded by stone figures of fallen men. But few remembered that she had once been a gentle soul, a priestess with a kind heart. Now, her only crime was to exist. The world had turned her into a weapon, a living curse, whispered across kingdoms. But even in that darkness, she was still a symbol, a reminder of how easily the innocent can be broken. Perseus knew none of this. He had heard only the stories of terror, and he believed them. To him, she was not a victim. She was the obstacle he had to defeat. Step by step, he ventured deeper into the shadows of her cave. The air grew colder, the silence heavier. The statues of fallen men stood around him, silent warnings of what awaited. And then, there she was. Medusa lay asleep. Her serpent hair shifted softly, hissing in restless dreams. Her face showed no cruelty, no rage, only exhaustion, only loneliness. Perseus raised his shield, careful not to meet her gaze. Through its reflection, he saw her fall, a mixture of beauty and horror, innocence and curse. For a moment, time seemed frozen. Perseus held his breath. The world itself seemed to wait. Then, with a sudden strike, his blade fell. A scream, silent yet eternal, echoed through the heavens. It was the cry of a soul wronged, a cry that chilled even the gods who watched above. But from Medusa's blood came something no one expected. A white horse with wings, Pegasus, soared into the sky. And beside him, a warrior with a golden sword, Chrysaor, emerged. From her death, new life was born. From her suffering, legends took flight. The deed was done. Perseus stood in silence, his sword stained, his shield lowered. Before him lay Medusa, no longer alive, but not gone either. For her story did not end with her final breath. The cave was still. The statues of fallen men stood around him, silent witnesses to both her curse and her innocence. Pegasus had flown, Chrysaor had risen, and Perseus was left holding a head that would never be forgotten. Carefully, he placed it inside the magic bag. Even in death, her gaze remained deadly. Even in death, she was a weapon. When Perseus returned, he was celebrated. Songs were sung of his courage. Poets praised his name. He was hailed as the hero who defeated the monster. But was that truly the story? Was it bravery to strike a sleeping soul? Was it heroism to kill someone who had never chosen her fate? Athena, however, claimed the prize. She fixed Medusa's severed head onto her shield, the aegis. With it, she struck terror into her enemies. No army could stand against her now, for a single glance at the shield brought death. Think about this. Even in death, Medusa was not free. Her pain was not over. The gods continued to use her, a tool of fear, a weapon of war. Poseidon's pride remained untouched. Athena's power grew stronger. Perseus' fame spread across the world. And Medusa, her name was forever cursed, remembered only as a monster. But perhaps we must ask ourselves, who was the real monster in this tale? The girl who lost everything, or the gods who played with mortal lives? The priestess who was faithful, or the king who sent a boy to his death for greed? Legends often hide the truth. History is written by the victors, not the victims. And Medusa's story may be one of the clearest examples. She was innocent. She was faithful. She was wronged. Yet her image became one of terror, not tragedy. Even now, thousands of years later, her story still echoes. It asks us questions that remain unanswered. What is justice? Is justice the will of the powerful or the shield of the powerless? Perhaps there are no monsters at all, only victims, only the innocent caught in the storm of ambition. Perhaps heroes are not born from courage, but from stories told by those who hold the pen. So I ask you this: when you think of Medusa, will you remember her as history does, a creature of horror? Or will you remember her as she truly was, a woman who deserved peace, but was given only pain? The choice is yours. And maybe, in choosing, we can finally give Medusa the justice she was denied.